Well, that song, I Still Talk to Jesus, is by a popular band called Laney. And for some of you who've been Christians for a while, there's a tension inside of you right now. Probably because it feels like, wow, that felt like a mockery of faith. Like, I do marijuana, but I still talk to Jesus. What is this? For those of you who are here and you're just exploring faith and you're still skeptical about faith, maybe you're thinking, wow, I didn't expect that in church, right? And maybe you're thinking, maybe they understand the world I actually live in. And that's why we played that song. Because the truth is, we've seen so many people across Austin come here and explore faith coming out of those very places. And that is where people live, with this struggle. The key line, he says at the end, amazing grace, trying to do better than yesterday. I know I need it, so I still talk to Jesus. And that's why we're starting into this series on prayer. The next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what is prayer? What good is it? How do you do it? Why do you do it? And like that song implies, is God there and does he listen? Will he help me? And I'm going to interview someone today who's going to bring a very unique perspective on those questions, because his first prayer was as he was dying of a drug overdose, an accidental drug overdose. And what he learned in his experience about God, reality, and about prayer will change you. But before we do that, I want to say a few words about prayer. You know, I grew up doubting God. I grew up believing, Jesus, just a myth. I had lots of questions, skeptical engineering mind. And yet I found a group of Christians that weren't afraid of my questions. And after about a year of really seeking, really wrestling with the evidence that's out there, like I gave to you guys last week at Easter, I finally decided, you know what? Jesus really was this Messiah sent by God to show us God in a form we could relate to. And I do want relationship with God. And so one night, I just prayed, my first prayer really from the heart. And I said, God, I want what Jesus did to count for me. I need your forgiveness. I want to do life with you. And my friends, these Christian friends said, hey, congratulations, you've begun a relationship with God. And then they challenged me to pray every night, and I did. I started trying to just pray every night, and it was cool, but sometimes it got really confusing, because after about a year, I had never heard anything back, not once. No skywriting, nothing. Maybe a few coincidences. I wasn't sure, and I remember one day I was jogging around the track, and I started thinking, maybe this whole God stuff is just ridiculous. Maybe it's not true. Maybe I've been fooling myself. I mean, if he wants a relationship, why not talk to me? And as I was walking around the track, I almost left God and almost left prayer for good. But I had a thought come into my mind. And the thought was, or maybe it takes time. Maybe like any relationship, it takes time to learn how to communicate and trust each other. And I listened to that thought, and I'm so glad I did, because here, years, decades later, I've realized those thoughts penetrating our minds are actually God's preferred, more direct way of communicating. I found that this verse really is true. If you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. 35 years of prayer after that, I have seen so many answered prayers, and I've journaled them. For 35 years, I've kept journals of what I was praying for, and then pages later, sometimes years later, here's the answer. And I've been amazed at how God does answer our prayer. He does interact with us. But I've also probably had way more unanswered prayers or confusing answers than I have answers the way I wanted them, which you might say, well, if prayer is only 50-50 or less effective, why pray? Because that's not the point of prayer. As we're going to see, the point of prayer is not to get God to do my will, because that would make me God, right? But the point of prayer is not attainment, but alignment. What we're going to see is that prayer is not getting God to do what we want, but relationally aligning more and more in love with God and to what God's will is and what God wants. And when we do start to align our hearts with God's heart and our will with God's will, he promises to reward us. Jesus said that, Matthew 6, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly and on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they'll ever get. When you pray, go away by yourself and shut the door behind you and pray to your Father in private. And then your heavenly Father who sees everything will reward you. See, God rewards this honest, heartfelt prayer because God created you for relationship. And prayer at the heart is just communication with the God who loves you. Don't forget that as we go through this series. There are lots of different ways to pray, but prayer at the core, at the bottom, is just you talking to the Creator who created you for a relationship with himself. And it will be rewarded. You know, God sees every prayerful thought, every motive, every intention. And we're gonna see that today. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, God won't listen to me. He doesn't hear my prayers because of what I've done in the past, you know, or maybe how far you've wandered or whatever it is. That's not true. And you're gonna see today that that's not true. You know, the truth is God created you to be his child. And he's done everything imaginable. That's what we celebrated last Easter, that he sent Jesus to die on a cross to pay for all your wrongs and all mine so that you could be right related to God and walk with God through life, because that's how we grow up into spiritual maturity. And it doesn't matter how far you've been, every time you turn your heart to God, he does hear. And if you want proof of that, I'm gonna interview a man today, Jim Woodford, who was a commercial airline pilot who had an amazing story. Not a unique story though. For those of you who don't know, I've actually, over the last 3 decades, studied more than 1,000 cases of people who have clinically died, come back, and speak of an experience of heaven and of God. And this happened to Jim. Now, an unlikely experience, as you'll see for Jim, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But here's a little caveat. Last night he was flying. He grew up in Newfoundland, but he lives now in New Brunswick, Canada. It's about as far northeast as you can get. He flew into Philadelphia last night, and the airlines grounded him there in Philadelphia and lost his luggage. So he is actually not here live like he was supposed to be. He is at a hotel room without his luggage in Philadelphia. And if you've ever wondered, you know, when you've flown recently, why it feels like hell, it's because Satan controls the airlines. And now we have proof, right? Yeah. And maybe the internet too, because this morning we decided, okay, we're gonna Zoom. And of course, we got him in a conference room, hotel room, and the internet's not working. But he has a cell phone, and so far it seems like Apple is on the good side. So we're gonna give it a shot, and if he's here, welcome Jim Woodford. Great to see you, because I have 2 messages in my back pocket just in case. So I'm glad I don't have to do them. So Jim. Let's get right into it.
Good morning, John. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone. My apologies for not being there. I'm speaking to you from the Church of the Holy Hilton Hotel.
That's awesome. Oh, well, and I don't have you on my confidence. Okay, I've got you on my confidence monitor there. So, Jim, you were a commercial airline pilot for how many years?
39 years. I've been in 52 countries.
Wow. And you know, you took this unexpected journey. In fact, you wrote it all down when you came back because it was a very unexpected journey for you. You call it Heaven, the Unexpected Journey. Tell us why. Where were you at the time when you clinically died?
Well, a little background for your folks there. Look, I'm the poster child for lost causes, believe me. I wasn't agnostic. I think like everyone, I hoped someone was in charge of the chaos, but I never looked for it. I was raised Catholic, but fell away from going to any church when I was quite young, and I became totally engaged in a career that I loved and just did not seek God. And so, as I say, I'm the poster child of lost causes. I'm living proof, John, that it is never too late. And those are the important words to remember.
Well, and you told me when we had our first interview that you hadn't prayed and weren't interested in God. Your wife is a follower of Jesus, right? But you had no interest in God, but you kind of felt like you didn't have a need because of all the things going well, huh?
My nickname was Diamond Jim. Not only was I successful as a pilot, I invested in numerous businesses. I had a fleet of British sports cars, a plane, a yacht. I mean, I was the epitome of the American Canadian dream. And yet I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have this empty feeling inside of me. And I think if we're honest with each other, we've all had that yearning from time to time. I realize now it was my soul yearning for a relationship with God, but I was too arrogant to accept it.
And then you had something happen just less than a decade ago, right? Guillain-Barré, how do you say it?
Yeah, well, Guillain-Barré, and it is a disease that affects the myelin sheath on the brainstem. Look, after a lifetime of perfect health as a pilot, you had to have medicals every 6 months, and I never had anything worse than a head cold. Another reason they called me Diamond Jim, I was available for duty anytime. And yet I came down with this disease, and it really, pardon the expression, it rocked my world. And even when I became paralyzed, I didn't even have the presence of mind to look up and say, God, if you exist, if you're there, could you help me? Not me, not Diamond Jim. The arrogance was staggering. And it took over my life. I lost my flying license, although I had retired by that time. I was 61 when that happened. And so everything changed for me. And I tried and tried to get help. I got approved for an experimental drug out of England for people that had Guillain-Barré, but it was experimental. And when it arrived and my doctors gave it to me, I was astonished to find that it stopped the agonizing pain. And look, I'm not talking about inconvenient pain. I'm talking about pain so bad that every joint in my body hurt. And it was like electric shocks all the time. I used a walker, and I'd gone from a guy that flew jets and rode horses and water skied to someone that couldn't even care for himself. And so, boy, talk about the proverbial wake-up call. And but I managed to get through that with the help of the medication. And I understand truly the slippery slope of addiction, because this medication was such a relief to me that I could actually sleep for longer than 3 hours a night, and to be able to get into a car and drive again, although I still had pain. But I discovered something. If I took more of it, I felt better. And I'm so sorry now that I did it, I guess, but I hid it from my wife, and I took more and more. So as I said, I understand the slippery slope of medication that can become necessary to cease pain. And I got to the point where when I was getting rid of a lot of properties that I owned, and one evening I drove to a large piece of property. I was in my truck. I was on a back road, and I parked the truck facing the setting sun. And I didn't plan it that way. I didn't. But as I sat there in the truck, trying to, because I'd taken the medication in the morning and it was wearing off. And I thought, I just don't think I have the energy to walk around this field. but I found some medication that I'd hidden in the truck. And I took the medication, and I sat back in the seat of the truck, waiting for that wonderful warm feeling of relief. But this time was different. It was different. All of a sudden, my hands and feet began to burn. The burning came upwards into my chest, and I felt as though I was drowning. And I kept raising my head as though I was in water and was drowning because my lungs were collapsing. And in that instant, when you know you've done something truly catastrophic, I knew that I'd taken more medication than I should have. From somewhere inside of me that I didn't even know existed anymore came a prayer. And I raised my hand to the setting sun, and it was violently shaking as death came to me. And I cried out, God, forgive me. Forgive me. Not out of fear. I'd faced death a couple of times as pilot, never flinched. But I realized in that instant of dying that I had been blessed with so much and thanked him for nothing. And I just felt such remorse. And I said that, I fell forward, banged my head on the steering wheel, and I'm gone. I'm not sure how long I was out at that time, but I remember sitting back up. I knew time had passed because the sun was now on the horizon. And suddenly I became aware that I had no pain. I finally got it right. You have to take the whole bottle. And I slid out of the truck. I walked about 15 feet away. It's an evening in April of 2014.
So Jim, you don't know you're dead. Is that right?
No, not at that point.
Okay.
No. And so I slid out of the truck. I walked about 15 feet away. It's spring. I could smell the grass. I can hear the birds. I looked down at my feet, and I could see through my feet. And I thought, well, that's just the after effect of the medication. And then I turned and looked back at my truck, and I'm outraged because some guy is in my truck. And not only that, he has the audacity to be sleeping on my steering wheel. So I go over there to have it out with him. And I'm startled. I can't begin to tell you what it's like to look at your own body and you're outside of it. And I know it's me. My head is turned sideways on the wheel. I'm bleeding copiously from the mouth. But Diamond Jim sets in. I could fix anything. If I could just crawl back in that truck, get back in my body, everything will be okay. But suddenly I began to rise. As a pilot, I'm a good judge of altitude. When I get to about 1,500 feet, and I'm looking out at the horizon, I look up, and John, this incredible golden circle appeared above me in the sky, about 60 feet in diameter, like a golden wedding ring. The circle filled with gold, and then the gold swung open inwards. And then, as though I had hit the throttles on one of the L-1011s I used to fly, my body canted back with 45 degrees, and I went flying into that tunnel at an incredible speed. And I don't have the time to describe everything, but if you could imagine warp speed, I guess is what Star Trek fans would call it. The stars were streaming by me on either side in that tunnel. I soon came to the end of the tunnel. There's this beautiful mist. I'm terrified because I'm flying and I'm not in control. There should be a couple of engines hanging off me somewhere. And I stepped, and I know I have to step through the portal because it's closing, and the tunnel is closing behind me. The portal is mist covered. I put my foot inside, and as you would, stepping into a place you can't see, and I bring my other foot in, and I look down, and the mist begins to clear. The tunnel closes behind me, and I can't believe what I'm looking down at. The most incredible, beautiful green grass you could ever imagine. And as I moved my foot, light rippled out. And look, it was stunning to behold. I look up.
Light rippled out of the grass?
The light rippled out from the grass with each movement I made.
Let me interject something real quick before you keep going, because I think this is really important for people to understand. If this is new to you, if you were here, like 8 years ago when I did Imagine Heaven and I interviewed others like Jim, then you get it. But you might be sitting there going, what is this? And I'll tell you, here's what's fascinating. You're gonna hear things that you're gonna go like, this isn't real, this isn't true. But I have heard everything Jim has said so far, thousands of times, over and over with people all over the world when they clinically die. And Jim has proof, right, that you were clinically dead for 11 hours. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. My wife's a nurse. She knew the neurologist that triaged me at the hospital. I was on 2 monitors, and I had complete failure, no heartbeat. And they said, and of course, everyone's triaged when they're brought to the hospital. By the way, I was missing overnight in my truck. And the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada found me when Lorraine called them by triangulating my cell phone and called a DOA when the ambulance arrived. So, it doesn't matter though, John, if it's 11 hours, 11 minutes, or 11 seconds. Time is different there. I do that because I can provide proof of the 11 hours from the time of.
And I point that out because, you might be tempted, if you're just hearing this for the first time, to think that was the drugs and this guy's just crazy. But I want to remind you of a couple of things. Is that, first of all, he didn't believe any of this was true. He didn't have any reason to make it up. He had everything he wanted. And by the way, I interviewed many people like that, where it doesn't make any sense that they'd be making this up, and yet they say commonly what he said. And even when they're up above their body, like he saw himself rising up, many times they experience the resuscitation of the doctors resuscitating them and can give evidence that they were actually out of their body because they saw things they shouldn't have. So anyway, just wanted to point that out to you before Jim goes on, because what you're hearing is reality. So go ahead. You step on the grass. You're in this beautiful place.
And to your point, though, John, and for your audience, look, I understand it's the age of the internet. You can find people that claim they go to heaven as often as I go to Walmart for dog food every Saturday. And who am I to say they don't? All I know is what I know. I myself questioned the doctors, and they were the ones that called the time of death and told my wife, get your children in to say goodbye. There's no point. Jim has been gone for so long. If he came back, he'd probably be nothing but a vegetable. And that was my greatest fear, John, coming back as a cabbage. I hate cabbage.
All right, well, take us back.
The point is, I think God is giving individuals, especially the most unlikely, like guys like me, God is giving us, because these are troubled times. And he's sending us guys like us. You're right. I could be home enjoying my horses and driving my British cars. Instead, I'm out beating the trails as often as I can because I owe that to God. I owe that to God. I know what waits. You see, we got it all wrong. We think we are human beings with a soul or spirit. We're not. We are souls and spirits encased in a human body. And that yearning that I felt in the middle of the night and that you feel in the middle of the night, that is your soul wanting to go back from whence you came.
Well, and Jim, you got, go. I know we have so much to talk about, and I don't want to run out of time.
I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly great. You also got a taste of hell before you got a taste of heaven. And I've also noticed that in my interviews with hundreds of people who have been last minute, wait till the last second, cry out for God's forgiveness, for some reason, he lets them see where they were going and what life, that life without God is hell. So talk about that and take us then into what you experienced.
I want your church family to know this. Heaven is real, but so is hell. And so is the devil. And that's exactly what Satan wants you to think. Oh, how bad can hell be? No Wi-Fi? Let me tell you something. Hell is horrific. The old-time preachers that scared the daylights out of people when they talked to them, they were right. This is what I beat the trails around the earth because I'm trying to save everyone I can from seeing what I saw. Because what came toward me as I looked out on the glorious entrance to heaven. Beautiful lights and fields and flowers on the right, and then a dark pit to the left. And then this creature coming up out of the pit with a look of hatred on his face and in its eyes, not just for me, but for all of mankind, John. He wants us with a passion. And I'm trying to explain to his whole reason for, since the schism in heaven, is to take your light out of you, the light of God that is in you. And so I'm terrified. It's coming after me, all of it. And I turn. Remember, I said there's 6 words and the prayers of my family that allow me to speak with you today. The first 3 words were in the truck. God, forgive me. With the creature at my back snarling, and I could hear its drool dropping on the ground before it consumed me. And I look up in the vault of heaven, and 3 stars appeared coming toward me, and they converged on each other, and this glorious light washed over me and washed behind me. And I turned in time to see that light hit the creature. And when it did, it shrieked and screamed and scrambled back down that hole like a rat running for cover. Darkness and evil cannot exist in the light of God. And if you are a part of this church, if you believe in God, darkness and evil cannot reside in you.
And, Jim, you told me, and I think it's important for this prayer series. You called out to God, God, forgive me. He heard you. And then you called out, God, help me. And these 3 points of light, which turned out to be angels, drive the darkness away. And then you're standing there in the presence of these angels, right? Describe it.
Yes. If you can imagine, they're very tall. One was 10 feet tall. The other one was 13. The warrior angel, who carried a sword, was about 15 feet tall. But the most gorgeous violet eyes. Now imagine how big those eyes are in a creature of that stature. But here's something incredible. As they came toward me, one of them put their arm around me and then their wing. And there I am, hugged by an angel. And it was incredible. But as they began to talk to me, the guardian told me that sadly mankind is losing the will to pray. He said, you have become on your earth a culture of instantaneous gratification. With our so-called advances in technology, everything is now at our fingertips, and we want everything now without thought of consequence. We pray to God for some request on Sunday, doesn't happen by Tuesday. God doesn't care. He's not listening. That's completely wrong. Every prayer you have ever uttered, right down to why does that idiot next door mow his lawn at 6:30 in the morning? God, make him stop. They record that.
And it's not the create. So you're in the presence of these angels, and I know you walked, you saw this beauty, and then you're hearing the angel explain to you what brought him to explain to you this about prayer.
Because I was standing looking at these beautiful horses that I think God shows us things that we love on earth to make us comfortable. And they showed me horses because I've grown up with horses and own them and still do. And they showed me these beautiful animals. And of course, I never read the Bible. I didn't know when Jesus comes back, we'll be riding a white horse. So I'm standing looking at this magnificent creature and stroking its silky body of light. And I look up in the sky of heaven, and I look, and I can't believe it. I see what I think, to my pilot's mind, are contrails going up in the sky of heaven. Now, you've all seen contrails on a sunny day as the jet goes over in the stratosphere, and the ice and the water evaporates out of the fuel as it's being burnt, and it turns to ice. And you see it going this way. In heaven, these 6 contrails were going up straight. Remember I said the 6 words and the prayers of my family? The guardian explained to me, I asked what those contrails were, and he said, James, he said, those are the prayers of your family for your soul, even now, going up before God.
Well, and
I found out when I got back, my family had gathered in the kitchen. Lorraine has 5 sisters, and they all prayed. And the prayer that they prayed was that if it be the will of Jesus, to send Jim back.
It's wild. So he's sitting there at the time, his family, 6 of them holding hands, praying for his salvation, that God would send him back. You're seeing these 6 contrails, or I've heard others talk about they're like shooting lights up to the throne of heaven. Our prayers are physically seen in heaven.
Yes, yeah. And I just want to say one final thing. Today, after a busy day, and our society has changed so much, and believe me, I'm a big believer in technology. But now, if we get a few spare minutes, what do? We Facebook, we text, or we send emails. And look, I'm as guilty as the next person. But remember this, when you're given these rare moments of peace and quiet in your life, it is God has orchestrated this, as if he's saying, I'm here, my child. Tell me about your day. Let me put it in order and give you the peace that passes all understanding. Prayer is so important, John. So I commend you on the theme that you have that you're trying to get across, which is prayer matters. And by the way, here's a word of advice: if you want to see prayer work, don't pray for yourself. Pray for someone else, and watch what happens.
That's good. So one quick last thing, because I know there's so much more we didn't get to. The angels take Jim and take him up above the city, where it's like he's flying, looking down over the city, and he sees these halls of learning, halls of music, and you saw the hall of knowledge, right? And
Yes.
And tell us, you asked particularly about that, and tell us what the angel said to you.
About the halls of knowledge?
About the halls of knowledge, yeah.
That's the repository of the book of your life, and of all the lives that have ever been conceived. The knowledge is there. And but here's something that I want to talk about as we went through on this aerial tour of heaven. There was all the buildings were beautiful, and by the way, they're magnificent. They kind of have a massive Corinthian columns and that sort of thing, but also very sweet, beautiful small homes. But here's the incredible thing. They weren't made from stone. They were hewn from blocks of light. Now, I don't want to make this sound too Las Vegas-y. It was a gentle, welcoming light. But there was one building, listen carefully, there was one building that was stunning. The light was so gentle, and in front of it was a massive green space, and it was covered with kids playing. And they're playing with dogs and cats and birds and deer. And I said, well, what to the guardian? What is that building? And he stunned me. He said, James, that is the nursery. And I said, nursery in heaven? He said, yes, James. This is where the souls of aborted children or children that have died in their innocence come to. And the light of God that was placed in them is so precious, it's brought back to heaven, and they were raised in the nursery. And I think that is the most beautiful thing that I saw. God's love for these children. And look, I understand more than most people, I think. Sometimes women are faced with a terrible choice, and they had to have a child. And of all the things I talk about, I have more women come up to me crying and say, Jim, I had to have an abortion. I couldn't feed another child. Or I couldn't do it, or my baby died in childbirth, and to know that this child waits for me is such a relief. She said, I've cried every night for 44 years, every Friday night at 7:30, which was the exact time she had the abortion, and God has her child waiting for her. I mean, this supreme being that we serve is the most gentle, loving of all imagination. It truly is.
Well, we gotta wrap up. There's so much more I wish we had time to talk about. Jim's last experience was in the presence of Jesus, but we'll have to leave that for another time. Jim, thank you so much for sharing everything with us from the Holy Hilton in Philadelphia. Let's thank. I'll tell you, I met Jim doing research for a new book I'm writing called Imagine God. And so we didn't even get to the best part of all. But I would encourage you, Jim's written all this down. Again, Jesus sent him back. He said, you must tell of the wonders we've shown you. And that's what he's spending his life now doing. He wrote it all down. If you want to read it, you can find it on Amazon. I think we have a picture of it up there. It's called Heaven, the Unexpected Journey. So you can get a copy of that and read his full story. It's pretty amazing. But as we wrap up, I want to challenge you to pray. Prayer is just conversation with the God who loves you. You know, the wonders he has in store for you, you can't even imagine. God delights to delight you. That's what he showed Jim. He had him smell tapioca in heaven, which was the smell of his grandmother's house where he was raised. He showed him horses. He loved horses more than anything. You know, God loves to walk with you and to help you through this life. And it's not always easy, but he's always there. So I want to challenge you, start praying every day, just like they challenged me. And what do you pray about? Well, use this acronym, ACTS. Pray to adore God, ACTS, okay? Can you put that up? Adoration. Just tell God what you know of him. Speak back to him what you know. You know, if you're in love with someone, praising them is a part of growing in love, right? And so just tell God back what you know. You might use a psalm, like Psalm 103, or Psalm 103 is a great one to use, and just pray through that. And then the second is confession. You know, the truth is, we all sin. God forgives our sin because he already paid for it on the cross. But he did that not so we'll just keep on sinning, not so that we'll just keep on doing those things, so that we will walk with him and let him grow us in strength from the inside out so we become more of what he intended. And then thanksgiving. You know, like Jim said, he suddenly realized all he had to be thankful for that he had never thanked God for. Just start making a habit throughout your day of being thankful, thanking God for everything. And then supplication, which just means asking. You know, Jesus said, God is like a generous father. You know, he's not gonna, if you ask him, if your kids ask you, you're not gonna give them a snake if they ask you for a piece of bread. And God is so good, he gives good gifts to those who ask, so ask him. So ACTS, use that and just start praying every day. And one last thing, let me pray for us before we hear this song. God, wow. You know why we go through all these trials and tribulations, and things don't go the way we plan or the way we expect. And today is a great example of that, and yet you work. And God, I pray that whatever you've needed each person to hear in their own heart and their own thoughts, that they've been able to hear what you want to say. Because that is how you talk to us. And God, help us be people who talk to you. Not just once in a while, but more and more all through our days, because you want that kind of relationship with us. We thank you in Jesus' name, amen.